When was the last time you saw Merry Christmas? You don't see it anymore. They want to be politically correct. If I'm president, you're going to see Merry Christmas in department stores. Believe me. Believe me.
So is President Trump winning the so-called war on Christmas?
As you know, there are some Americans who are offended by any reference to Jesus Christ. And that's what the USA celebrates on December 25th, the birth of the baby Jesus. President Grant signed the holiday into law after Congress passed legislation in 1870 acknowledging the country's Judeo-Christian tradition.
Yes, this is FAP News, FAP News channel. Thank you for noticing.
Here at FAP News, we make up, you believe. We have a report from the front in the war on, I'll say it, I'm going to say it, you ready? Christmas. There is a war on Christmas. That's right. It has been waged in the United States for not just decades, but centuries, since before the nation's founding. The first recorded anti-Christmas action was led by Agent 711 of a partisan spy agency against the government and its defense contractors. They traveled over Christmas night. These insurgents used the cover of darkness and snow to strike at defense contractors celebrating Christmas and recovering from their merrymaking. These guerrillas murdered 22, wounded 98, took hostages, and seized military equipment. Terrorists. Terrorists. Or, as you might know them, George Washington crossing the Delaware.
Wow. They don't tell you that in school, that Washington was such a Christmas terrorist.
Yeah, he was the first anti-Christmas action activist. Anti-Cra.
Wow. Anti-Cra, I love it.
The only way that you can really stop this kind of thing is to arouse public opinion. It's very upsetting. It has a bad moral effect.
Forced adversity.
I think there ought to be a law against them. Tonight I'm going to show you why.
So far, we've got these recorded. Video Nasties, Dungeons & Dragons, Satanic Panic. The Comics Code, Frederick Wortham, which is... It's going to be a couple episodes. Morgan and I both being big comics fans, we got kind of deep on that one.
I think the PMRC might be 2 parts, and I think the ESRB might be 2 parts as well. We had quite the jam sessions on those.
We were going to try and keep it all contained to one episode when we started out.
Because of the way they evolve, sometimes I think for those episodes, it made sense to sort of end up in 2 parts. We're like, because the thing we're talking about is both like, is more a part of the panic than not. We're like the D&D one, what's in D&D doesn't matter to the satanic panic. It's just sort of part of it. We're like the comics thing goes on for decades, right? And the PMRC hearings, it influenced a whole industry, and the ESRB has influenced a whole industry.
Well, and plus we're getting better at knowing what to talk about as we go. I mean, like as amazing as the first episode is, thanks to Ryan almost exclusively.
Yeah, Ryan carried that one.
We as we've gone on, we're like, well, let's look at this type of cultural impact and stuff like that. And one thing we just recorded last recording session, we went back and recorded Heroes and Villains because we started doing that 3 episodes in, where we
with a video game episode,
Well, it mainly started with Bill Gaines from the Comics Code one, because
he was our first legend.
Fucking legend. But yeah, here we've got the general list here. So these first few we've done the Video Nasties, D&D, Wortham, the Code, the ESRB. We did Tipper Gore and the Rock Porn Senate hearings. That was fun. A lot of really cringe, reactionary.
Which led to the invention of the Tipper Gore experience.
Yep, we got a new a segment we'll do called the Tipper Gore experience. McCarthyism in Hollywood, we haven't gotten here yet. The Hollywood Commies, the Hays Code, and the MPAA. Just Say No and Dare. That might probably end up being 2 different episodes because they're not really the same thing, but they are. Mods versus Rockers, which was the first modern moral panic from what I can find. Heavy Metal and Satan again, good old goat face. William Randolph Hearst and Cannabis. MAGA and banning woke books. Prohibition. Some great entries the other day that we came upon. Mary Sue. We're going to do one about the Mary Sue, the concept.
Yeah, Mary Sue is sort of the, when we talk about like Gamergate and the Star Wars fandom menace stuff, Mary Sue is kind of a fundamental snarl word and panic that sort of touches all of those things. So I thought it would be interesting.
So I started thinking that like moral panic does sum up a lot of this stuff, but I think we might need to broaden it a bit to like social and cultural panics. Just because it's not always the best way to describe it. George Carlin, and that's going to be a fun one.
That's going to be really interesting because I hadn't even thought about that till we were doing the music one, and it was like, oh wait, I think you were the one who pointed it out, and as we got talking about it, it's like, this is really crazy, all the panic around him and some of the other comedians of the era.
I had him included on my initial list, him and Lenny Bruce both.
You did, and I just missed that.
I mean, Carlin is way more, I'm a Carlin fan. I don't really know Lenny Bruce's stuff, but he also was arrested not even that long before Carlin for performing. Then I added these few as we were talking. I came up with a few here. The John Birch Society. Rush Limbaugh deserves his own episode. Atheists, Jews, Islam, Scientology, and psychiatry. And I might find other things that Scientology
We'll have to
is
change our names and like get the voice altering things for Scientology.
BLM, socialism, communism, feminism, SJW's woke civil rights, immigration, and then I put that here because you remember the caravan? You remember how that was coming? And it was,
oh Lord, it was a coming. Oh wait, you know what?
These immigrants in this caravan, they're coming, and then like, oh, and then the election's gone, and where's the caravan?
Nobody cared.
Nobody cares. Taxes, My Little Pony, The Simpsons. So it's going to be a pretty broad range of topics with the general same theme. In the trans community, who are I'd say they're probably the main boogeyman, so to speak, that is being weaponized right now. Is that right? Seem right? Yeah.
It feels like it.
You're right. And if this is a long line of different people that have been marginalized, I think what's really disturbing this time is that they are such a small minority. They're a very visible minority. Let's just focus on America here, or even if you want to expand it to the UK, they're a small minority.
We don't want to talk about Turf Island. Sorry.
It's just because the richest person here, or not the richest, but one of the richest people here is a villain. That's the reason. I mean, that's what's really annoying. If it wasn't for her, we wouldn't be called bloody Turf Island. Yeah. They are such a small minority of the general population that to have all of that pressure on them when already they have their own mental health to deal with in dealing with their gender identity, it's sickening.
Yeah. And I think I want to thank you two for doing a good job of just speaking out. And you guys don't have to do that, but you're here, and I can't be the only one who sees that and hears that and appreciates that. So I just want to,
I hope
give you guys a little bit of praise.
I know I'm not always going to get it right in my language, but then I don't with anything else either. But I do try my best. But my favorite line probably in the entire MCU is in the Captain America: The First Avenger, where he says, "I just don't like bullies."
Yep. That's simple as that. I mean, that's what it started out as for me. Like when I started doing this content, it was like generally I just knew that these the reactionary responses to this stuff, whether it's Black Lives Matter or trans issues, whatever, was all definitely harmful and dangerous, but silly just in the sense of how they see these things. That's how it started out for me, was just wanting to represent my fandoms, comics specifically, and then hopefully use that to, get people to see the harm that's being caused and potential harm. And then in the middle of last year, my teenager came out as non-binary. And then it became something much more personal for me. So I'm just doing what, I feel like any decent parent would do if they had the platform at all to do it. So.
Well, I know this is something that right-wingers hate, but I'm going to use the word, and it's the frivolity of privilege. And I mean, they don't quite understand what privilege means, but they don't have to care about these issues, and so they are choosing to be bullies about it.
Yep. Because they feel like they have to hear about it, so that's why, like, you get your Bill Maher's who are like, well, I don't want to have to deal with this pronoun stuff, right? Because, like, someone made it a big deal, right? The right wing, these weirdos, made it a big deal that trans people were out doing their thing, living their lives. And now you get people like Bill Maher and people with that kind of mindset who, like, well, why do I have to hear about it? It isn't my problem. And instead of blaming the person who's making the ruckus, they blame the one being bullied, because they're the ones without a voice.
Part of what was that lady's name, the crazy lifestyle guru lady that was running in the primaries for Democrat?
Williamson?
Something Williamson maybe, but
something Williamson.
She's pretty wacky, and she was not qualified to do anything more. But she did have a good point on one thing. She was like, "We have an empathy deficit."
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, that's actually fucking spot on. It's we have a populace that through things like the war on Christmas and through things like a lot of these moral panics that, see how I'm tying this up to in the show.
Yep.
Through a lot of these things, it's almost just designed to, or at least has had the effect of reducing people's empathy and focus, making people focus on themselves and their immediate needs and comfort, really, not even needs, comfort. Like, if my comfort is challenged at all, if I have to notice you or think about you in any way that is, not passive or whatever, then somehow that's negative against me. That's harming me, and I have to fight back against that. And that's not a good, the general psychology of a culture. It's not good.
Should we shout out our muse?
Oh yeah, we have to. Thank you for reminding me.
Of course, happy to help.
There's one person that motivated me to do this podcast more than any other person, and we're going to thank him in every single episode that we do. We actually recorded it retroactively for the ones that we missed. Look, we cannot thank Ethan Van Sciver enough for inspiring this podcast, and I'm being serious. He's without him completely, like, just responding to content that I'd made on YouTube merely suggesting that there was a thematic thread between McCarthyism and the Comics Code thing and then Comicsgate and now and whatnot. I just suggested, I hadn't done any research into it, but then within a few days he started tweeting about these things, and he didn't address me directly, but he was addressing it, saying that actually Comics Code was a good thing, and actually McCarthy was right, and blah blah blah, all within the same thread. And I'm like, holy shit, he's confirming it, at least in his mind. And I think he is kind of the id of a lot of conservatism. So without that, I would never have conceived this podcast to do something that really looks at that connecting thread. And so he is therefore the muse of this podcast. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely Christmas holiday.
Happy holidays, Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas.
Hanukkah, Festivus, fucking whatever it is or nothing. I just hope that it's happy. I hope you get to spend time with loved ones. Yes. And, Happy New Year and everything.
Yep.
Peace.
Later, folks.
It's very upsetting. It has a bad moral effect.
Forced adversity.
I think there ought to be a law against them. Tonight I'm going to show you why.